Welcome to this episode of Kelly's Reality. Today, I am really excited to have everyone's favorite meteorologist, Ginger Zee, on with me. Ginger, thank you so much for your time and chatting with us today.
How good it is to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. So as a therapist, I'm always so appreciative of people sharing their stories about mental health. And I love that, especially now, it's been so much more comfortable for people to talk about what medications they're on, ask for therapist recommendations, and truly share their stories. And so that's why I really admire you for being brave enough to share your stories. And I would love to know what kind of, or who led you to really wanting to be able to make your story so public?
Yeah, I think, what I've learned from it is the number one medication for me is honesty and transparency, truly. And I think that if we could all live a bit more like that, it would eradicate the start of a lot of issues and therefore the festering of a lot of issues. Obviously, I'm not talking about something that is a chemical or genetic or, many things that would not be helped by honesty or transparency. Right. But in a lot of cases, and including mine, I think that is the first thing that went wrong. So that's what I've learned from doing it, is that I just keep healing. The more I share, the better it gets. And that's worth it because it makes me, who may have different abilities than other people because of this thing that I have that makes me different, but it does not in any way make me less productive at work or a worse mother or any of those things, nor does it have to, especially when transparently shared and supported. And so going back to why, especially with the book, I had definitely talked here and there about anorexia and I mentioned depression maybe. But when I went and I was pregnant with my son, I was looking for books about weather for babies and I couldn't find any. And I had, since I was in 7th grade and got one bad, and I say bad grade, one less than A on a paper, and I was in a new school, I had a teacher say, well, maybe writing's not your thing. I had always loved writing, but I just said to myself right then and there in a very binary, childlike way, I am not a good writer. And I labeled myself that and kept that label. So I had gone to that publisher. I had gone to a publisher when I was pregnant thinking, well, I could do a baby book, 60 words and some pictures. I can handle that. And so that's where I went. And as I was describing the character that I thought would be great for this book, I wanted a young girl, especially, to be a science lead. And they were like, that's not a baby book. That's more of like a middle grade chapter book. So write that. And I was like, oh, no. I'm not a writer. And they were like, well, why don't you let us determine that? Why don't you go and try to write? So I wrote a couple of chapters of what is now the trilogy of Helicity. And they liked it so much, they said, write a trilogy. And I was like, man, you want me to write? And as the editor's asking me about what I'll base those stories on, I start talking about my storm chases. And then I start, just as I do when I talk to a friend, and she was very good, I started divulging secrets about my personal life and funny stories that had happened. And then all of a sudden I'm talking about suicide attempts. And she's like, Ginger, this is a book. I was like, really? I don't know. The word memoir to me still sounds very strange because it feels like you're done. But she said, just write it down and hey, we'll see what it becomes. I wrote that book faster than any of the other ones. It was so easy to get out. And then when I did, I went through that array of emotions. Like, did I say too much? Did I say too little? Oh my gosh, look what the lawyers had to do to it. But at the end of it, what it ended up being was the perfect amount. And the perfect amount for right then in my life. And I think as I've read other authors and as I have evolved, I've realized there's a lot more to share. And now that I have the confidence, I will keep doing it, because if I have known one thing about myself throughout my career is that I am pretty good at communicating the science of meteorology. What I realized through this book is I think I'm pretty good at communicating the science of psychology. Take all of this a decade of really great deep therapy and share it with people so that they can have a couple of the tools that I've learned and get them a lot faster, hopefully, through funny stories and making fun of myself. That is the best way to share and have the responsibility and gratitude for being alive, because I am one that got away, and I feel lucky every day for that.
Yes. And such power in sharing your story. And like you said, you have overcome. It's something you work on every day, but you are still a productive mother, a great employee. You still live a great life, and you have dealt with demons. And I think, again, there's such power in sharing that. And can you remind us what the name of your book is?
Sure. It's Natural Disaster. I cover them. I am one. And that was the easiest part to write because it wrote itself. I've covered every major disaster from Katrina on, and being in each of these hurricanes and wildfires globally, the wildfires in Australia, I really have this unique seat in life where I get to be there before, during, and after people's absolute worst moment. Right? I mean, in most people's lives, a hurricane taking your home or your daughter or your husband, that's pretty much the staple that's going to change, the trauma that's going to change your life. So there's intertwined psychology in it already. I didn't anticipate, nor was I trained for, but I feel like I needed that too. And it has done its own training for me in a lot of parallels in life and teaching how grief and gratitude work.
Wonderful. And what advice would you have for someone who feels like they are all alone, that they're the only ones suffering this, or maybe they're worried about what someone might think about them if they share some of the thoughts going on in their head?
Yeah, I think, everyone always talks about stigma and they're like, we really need to get rid of the stigma. I think we're getting there. I think, generationally, we're starting to eradicate that, even globally, beyond just the Western world. I think that I was talking to my friend who grew up in the Ukraine, and he said even his, friends, family are starting to open up to therapy being okay, maybe, or maybe not therapy, but it's more like, oh, I can say I have darker moments and there's not as much stigma around that. I think what I always really want is to get the stigma away from the action, which is the therapy, or something more, because the moment that I say I checked myself into a mental health hospital, that's when eyebrows start raising, like, oh, like everyone's like, oh, you're so brave for saying that. If I'm so brave for saying that, that means other people can't say it.
Right.
I think that's the thing that I want to stop, like, so what? If I had to go to alcohol or drug rehabilitation, everyone would be like, good for you. But no one says good for you, or maybe not as openly because they're not used to it. They're not used to hearing it. So I think we need to get to the same point we have with drugs and alcohol, where we, I think for the most part, societally understand that that is a disease, just like many others. We commend people for taking control and being in AA and being sober for however long. Commend people for taking control of their mental health and getting the help that they need. And then, it's one thing for me to say when I've had the financial ability and the family support. What about the person who doesn't have that? And that's really where we need to dedicate our time and our efforts, is not just making the action not have a stigma, but making the action possible for everyone. Beyond and really the action. And this is why I think, and I maybe you can say what you think about this, but until I went to the hospital, I saw a lot of therapists before then. I saw a dozen. And I don't think that I was ever officially or appropriately diagnosed, because no one had the amount of time they did in the hospital to look and dive deep and focus. And in your position, the more time you spend with someone, the better you can assess their situation.
Oh, yes.
That's how science works. And observation is the key point of helping for the future. And so I wish we had that space, or that societal, and I think I was reading the history of it, like the late 60s through the 70s, there was a bit more of this type of thing that I'm talking about, where it was kind of like a more welcoming place where people could be assessed and maybe go for a week or a month or whatever it was they needed to get their mental health right, or set in motion the right way. Get that true treatment that a lot of us need, and like, we should be able to have a week away from work where, okay, I had to go because guess what? I'm going to be 20 times more productive and a better person on all fronts, including my job, if I come back from this and have the right help or the right medication or whatever it is. That's how I look at it now. I think of the amount of money and time that I spent on making my body look good, on the physical appearance. And if I would have invested that much time and money into my mental health, I wouldn't have had this problem.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. And I love that too. And like you'd mentioned, going to rehab for drugs or alcohol, going into whether it's inpatient hospitalization or seeing a therapist weekly, it's really giving you tools to live life the best way you can. And like you said, no one would really shame someone for getting sober. It's the same thing with the mental health. You're just getting your mind right as opposed to, drinking or drugs. So,
And I had an addiction too, and that addiction was to hurting myself.
mhm.
Not in a cutting way. There's lots of ways to hurt yourself, and there's lots of ways to use control that hurts you and hurts others. So it's very much like addiction to drugs or alcohol that way, because the toxicity that I was addicted to then led me to an abusive relationship, then led to all these things where I was not the best person that I could be societally, family, friend, anything, and definitely not in my career as good as I could have been.
Yes. So it makes me wonder too, how do you keep your mental health strong now, especially with so much going on in the world right now, being under quarantine, living in New York? How do you stay on top of things? What works for you?
I think it's just the same as my parallels for keeping healthy and physicality is I am committed to spending the time once a week with my personal trainer of my brain, my therapist. But you don't get in shape just with a personal trainer once a week. That's not enough. You have to have nutrition. You have to have sleep. You have to have your sit-ups and push-ups every day, your regular cardio. And that's what I look at. I look at meditation as those sit-ups for my brain. I look at my gratitude writing. I look at journaling as all part of that overall goal, look. And now sleeps for both of them. And I have this aura ring, and it's been really, and I'm narcoleptic, so there's a whole nother thing that doesn't apply to as many people, but definitely has had huge implications for my mental health. And the more I pay attention to the little variables throughout my day, and I'm a scientist, so I'm always looking for like, what was that thing that made me not have as much REM or deep? Because I'll tell you what, my mood is heavily influenced by that, and I'm seeing that now. Wow, why have I never paid this much attention? And I should have.
Yes. And one thing that can really trigger, moods, reactions is social media. It's a hot topic now. It comes up all the time in my sessions. For me personally, what is your relationship like with social media, especially with reacting to maybe negative or critical comments about your appearance, your past, things you might say? How do you handle all of that?
I'd say it's pretty unhealthy, my relationship with social media. And I don't mean that in probably the way that most people feel like I am saying it. I'm unhealthy in the way that I am still looking to it for a barometer. Not that I believe it, positive or negative, because I've really trained myself over the last 20 years of doing this job to not believe it. It has allowed me to build these beautiful boundaries that I don't know if I could have outside of it. So I'm always actually very grateful for the haters, because I learned pretty early, wait a minute, this person doesn't know me, and they don't know what, and then I was able to, that was the first time I was able to use the tool I call the fence, where I could put a fence up and realize somebody could feel or say something on one side of it, but it didn't need to penetrate into mine. And that very simple boundary setting that a lot of people have trouble with was taught to me via social media. My unhealthy part is that I'm using it as a barometer only for all of the things in my life, as far as my production, my creation, what I do. I think there's a great value in it, but a lot of times I'll get sucked. Even last week, I was like, no one's looking at my climate change stories. I need someone to
saw that. Yeah.
And it, in the opposite or the inverse way that some people would say, I want to post a pretty picture so that I get comments to make myself feel good. I'm not there. I'm definitely past that. Believe me, I still have major self-esteem issues like everybody, and I'm happy to talk about it, but I'm past that to the point where no. I want to trap you. Use what you think this is.
I love that.
And then turn it on its head so that you go look at the thing that I am really insecure about, and that's that you don't care enough about the planet.
Yes, and I did see that post, and I loved, because you had said, pictures of my hair and legs and body get way more views and eyes. So I love that you turned that around and said, hey guys, I got your attention. Now let's talk about climate change.
Yeah.
I loved that.
And that's the healthy part of it. What's unhealthy is that I now have this need or want to fulfill the other part. And I realized that I even talked to my therapist this morning. I had my therapist this morning, and I said, I'm having a really hard time, because I feel like I work hard every single day because I want people to understand science is science. And it gets me very upset to see science in the medical community or science anywhere put down, not
Mhm.
believed. And, that makes me at times feel not hopeless, but less like I have less hope.
Mhm.
And then I realize and I overtake myself and I say, no, this is about action. This is every single word you use and every single thing you do is the thing that's going to make things better. And
Mhm.
that's where hope comes from, is from action. It's not just, oh, I hope this
Yeah.
happens. Like, no, 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 make
Yeah.
it
Yep.
happen. So
Yep.
then I take that energy and I force it into making it happen. And
Mhm.
that's what I've been doing with any negativity that I feel or uncertainty. And this time I've had some of my grayer mornings than I've had in 10 years since I was in the hospital.
Mhm.
And I've been able to recognize the triggers because I have these great tools in place
Yeah.
because I've worked so hard to set up my mental health and my team. And it's been manageable, It's
Mhm.
different because I think I'm toying with something I've never touched, and that's anxiety.
Yeah.
Oh, you poor people that have anxiety, because I'm a depression person, so, like, I get
Yeah.
that a little better.
Yep. Yep.
But
Yeah.
a global pandemic apparently will incite anxiety in people that don't even have it, so.
For sure, for sure. And I love that, like you said, I have these tools that maybe I don't know, but I'm learning. I'm
Mhm,
working on myself, and my motto has just been one day at a time, or in my case,
mhm.
just get to bedtime, whether it's my kids or my own. That's kind of how I've been able to manage the anxiety too. Like, okay, today's a random Tuesday. I'm going to get through Tuesday, and then I'll deal with Wednesday, and
Yeah,
just trying to stay in the moment. Oh, and speaking of kids, I believe we have kids the same age. So I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, I
yeah,
think around the same age.
yeah.
And for me, your body changes after having babies. I work with a lot of new moms in the practice too. So what comes up all the time is accepting your postpartum body. And I know you talked a lot about that when you were on Dancing with the Stars. Gosh, was it like just 12 weeks after you had had your baby? Which is incredible.
I had a C-section, and 6 weeks after the C-section, I went from my appointment where they said, "Yeah, you could try it, go for it," and went straight to rehearsal. So
Oh
I
my
started
gosh.
at 6 weeks, and I was, in week 2 of the show, like, flying back and forth across the country.
Yeah.
It was an intense turnaround, and for a former well, not former, a still managing anorexic, it
Mhm.
was probably one of the best times because I didn't even have time to think about it.
Yep, yep, autopilot.
And it got me in such good shape, I didn't have to worry about it. It wasn't like something, but what I think it did was sprung me into anti-reality, and then when I had my second child, there was no Val to spin me around until I
Yeah.
lost, the 30 pounds, and that was a much more difficult, and still has been.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say difficult. There's a lot of other things that I'm much harder on myself about. For me, it's the skin changes and those things, and what I try to do, and I'm so lucky to still have my mom and to watch her because she teaches me a lot of what not to do. You know,
Mhm.
she will tell me and be very open about how aging has been very difficult for her. Now she's had 4 C-sections, I've had 2.
Yep.
There's definitely differences, but how to see and hear what she's saying and know what that sounds like from a parent, I'm like, "No, she's wrong," and I'm able to kinda go, "Wait a minute.
Yep.
My skin is my skin, and it looks like this, and
Mhm.
it might change. It might look like Amy Robach's, who's also had 2 children, which I don't
Mhm.
understand, and it doesn't look like she did." Like, I could compare myself and my belly and all of those
Mhm.
soft spots to me, but at the end, how much energy did I just put that to? I already spend 80% of my day thinking about what I'm eating, what I'm not eating, what I'm working out, what I'm not working out, thinking about my body, looking in the mirror. Shut up.
Yep. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
and that's usually where I get to. I get so sick of myself that I'm like, "Okay, focus on something else. Oh my
Sure.
gosh, people need to care about the climate." And then
Right. Yeah. And then you go back into your passion and refocusing, like that those thoughts are always going to be there, but I love just refocusing that energy into like, okay, I can either sit in this and be anxious and self-critical, or I can channel this into something that's meaningful to me.
yeah.
So what do you think the answer is to how can we as women with, children
Ugh.
accept or at least tolerate postpartum bodies? I feel like that's the tough question.
Well, and I will say this is the other great point that I learned from doing dancing. we were doing 4 to 7 hours of cardiovascular work a day. That is a lot,
Oh
right?
my
And
gosh.
the one thing that probably helped me in my anorexic thoughts that I still deal with, even though
Mhm.
they're fully manageable, and I have a better and healthy relationship, I'd say, with food pretty for the most part.
Mhm.
I saw my body as an elite athlete at that point, something
Mhm.
that most people don't have the time to do. It was a profession for
Mhm.
3 months of my life. I didn't look that much different.
Mhm.
I looked
Wow.
good,
Interesting.
but I didn't look, like, so if you were to
Mhm.
have this strange and unique opportunity like I did,
Mhm.
I think you might be surprised at how little would change. And like that alone might help flip the idea of like, what are you looking for? Is it that inch that's going to change everything for you? And what's it going to mean for you at the end? Is it going to matter? And I think about that one quote people say, I forgot who said it on their deathbed, but like, I wish I would have had that second piece of cake.
Mhm.
There's
Mhm.
times where I have to say that to myself to get over it too. And I use a lot of, anorexia often, and better, but can be related to obsessive compulsive personalities,
Mhm.
and that not disorder, but to the personality that
Mhm.
because you are so obsessed with the control of food that I will immerse myself in that way where I'll say, no, 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 no. Not like I'm going to binge to
Mhm.
outweigh it because that's getting into another problem. Where I really have to say, go. And that's how I kind of beat it in the first place. I remember in college, I mean, beer and Malibu rum helped a lot.
Uh-huh.
That was one of the first times where my anorexia was not only getting in the way of my social life,
Mhm.
but I was able to my inhibition was lowered. The breadstick was there. I
Yeah.
ate it. And then the next day, I didn't look any different.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think that kind of like simple math immersion was so helpful and still is in my
Mhm.
healing. And so I think that's how I think about postpartum body is like, what do I think is actually possible? Do I want to put
Mhm.
in the effort to get that last inch because again, at most points, I think most of us, it's our skin.
Mhm.
My husband will say that to me. I don't know about you, but with
Yeah.
kids, one of them is just like him and his skin. One of them, my youngest, is like me,
Uh-huh.
and he's chewy. He's like a chewier kid. He
Uh-huh.
chewy skin, and he has a layer of. It's not chubby.
Yeah.
It's solid, and that's
Mhm.
who I am. And so, as much as it helps seeing my mom, it helps really seeing my child
Yeah.
and thinking that is so beautiful. His chewy skin,
Mhm.
and thank goodness he's a boy because he's got chewy skin.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that chewy skin drives me crazy, so realizing that, and realizing who we are is who we are, and there's
Mhm.
many other things to do and focus on. But I could stand up right now and show you what I do every day in the mirror. It's like I
Mhm.
still pull it back, I still think, "What if?"
Mhm.
And then I stop myself.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I always say too, like, there's not a woman alive who absolutely loves her body perfectly.
No.
We all struggle with that. It's tough too when you see social media, especially too with a lot of celebrities on the magazines. Like 6 weeks after having a baby, they look like they never had a child, and it's tough to see that. And then we have the realities of stretch marks, gaining a lot of weight. The realities of postpartum body, and I think there's always a trade-off too. And that's what I'll tell people. Like, yes, if you really want, like you said, you could put in the 4 or 5 hours of cardio a day, certainly, but it is a trade-off because then it's, you're missing out on other things. It's a lot of energy. So like you had said, what effort do you really want to put into this? And is it really going to change?
The results, I don't think are going to impress you so much that you're gonna look back and be like, "Yeah, that was worth it."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's the same thing as having the breadstick or the glass of wine for
Yep.
me. It's like, I can't do that every day, all day, but
Mhm.
and can I work out one day for 2 hours if I really wanna get my mind right? But that's what I put the message correctly in my brain from the start. What am I doing this workout for? I
Mhm.
know I feel better. My reasoning behind it and why I really rarely dread a workout.
Mhm.
I can't think of the last time I dreaded a workout because I have put that in my mind as I know your brain's gonna work better after this and you're
Yep.
gonna be a better mom.
Mhm.
One. I wish
Yeah.
my mom would have had time to work out more. She would have
Yeah.
been much more even, you
Mhm.
know?
Yes, yes. That's been a sanity saver for me too. My 5-year-old still does not sleep through the night. So I literally have not slept in 5 years. And truly for me, the exercise has been the sanity saver. And I'm with you. I don't dread it. I get it. I'm like, okay, I get, 30 minutes to myself. And I don't think anyone's ever regretted a workout. You always feel so much better afterwards. And it has been the one thing to keep me going for 5 years.
I mean, this is the part where I've gotten much more, I don't know that it's spiritual, but it's that gratitude thing. It's that while I'm in the workout, I regularly, high on the endorphin, will have that thought. And there's a Peloton instructor that says it every single workout, Jessica. And she always says, it is not it's not a problem to be here. It's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege that we get to move our bodies. So like as I'm running and I start to struggle, I'm not joking. My brain can tell my legs, and suddenly my legs are like, heck yeah, privilege to be here. I swear I go faster. I'm lighter. We are so powerful here when we want to be in the best way, and we're so powerful in the negative way. And so that's something that I use in the workout, and I have had insane results from doing that because it's true. We are privileged to be able to move our body. I get an hour. My mom never had that hour. It's very cool to have that, and that will start to switch my brain around pretty fast too. But even today, I woke up. I have been moody since I woke up, and when I say moody, most of the time I mean I don't feel. I'm a pretty neutral person anyway. I'm not like a super joyful, super anything. But I just felt irritated, then down, then irritated, then down. Like I was having a real morning. All I know is that the moment I feel that, if I say it out loud, and I don't even just say it out loud anymore. I say it to my therapist. I say it to my husband. I write my mom. I write it down on a journal, and I put it on social media. As soon as that happens, 50% of that stuff is gone.
Wow.
And I start to feel better. So it might be like too much or too soon. And if you don't want to follow me because of it, like, that's okay. Good. And that's what something else, this is the other thing that I think I finally learned from social media and from writing my book. I had always, like we all do, most people want perfection, right? Even if we say we don't, that's like the strange childlike idealism that we live with because we think that life is, and my husband, watching my 4-year-old now, he always says, I'm a bad boy. And I always have to say, no, you're not a bad boy. You made a bad choice. Well, I need to be good. I need to be, he's like a born perfectionist. It's very scary. And when I say to him, life is not good or bad. It's somewhere in between. We all fall somewhere in between, and we're going to make choices. It'd be better to be on the good half, the better half. But it's impossible to be all the way to that perfection. And I do think a lot about that when I have those types of mornings. Is like, yeah, today's just on the bottom half. Okay. And like that, it's a law of averages, and this is how science works, and it's how energy works. I can't have a really good day unless I have this shit day. Oh, sorry for.
Oh, you're good. It makes you appreciate it. That's what I'll always say too. And also the mistakes that we made in life, the bad choices, the loser guys we've dated, it's those moments where the negative things happen to us that really help us grow. We don't really grow when someone's telling us how beautiful we are, or how perfect we are. It's those real raw down moments where you're like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to change things around. That's what really.
Yeah. And you know what? Then that's the other thing I was getting to, and I got lost track. But when I wrote my book, it was the first time that I was really showcasing how imperfect I was. I was telling everyone, not only am I not perfect, I had to go to the hospital because of how imperfect I am. That's a lot of imperfection to share. And just like the immersion of a breadstick or food, when it immersed in not being perfect, it was amazing how little changed and how much I actually felt relieved. And, you're only sick as your secrets, and all those things. I think that there's a level. I don't think we should know every single dark secret about everybody, because that's not right either. But I do think that we could allow for a more transparent, and imperfection should be embraced. And I was talking about on a narcolepsy podcast recently. Why is sleep looked at as lazy? Why is sleep a negative thing? Or why was it for so long? I think we're starting to flip the switch a little bit there. But this is a cultural thing and a United States thing. And I don't know if that's because we came here, we needed to prove ourselves and work so hard. I mean, guys, it's been 300 years. Like, you just let go of the overachiever thing a little bit. The siesta, can we relax for a second? Because of part of what we're all trying to achieve is set in tone and modeled for us by
Mhm.
our forefathers, and that's weird if
Yes.
you think about it.
Yep.
That is where a lot of this comes from. So if you talk about societally comparing levels of anxiety, I know that the United States is very high.
Mhm.
And you compare a lot of the other things where we don't value people's time,
Yep.
maternity leaves, vacation
Mhm.
time. I think it kind of just spells it out for you.
Yep.
We've done this to ourselves,
Yeah.
I always and I go back on that too, and I think people are starting to catch on to that as well.
Mhm.
That would be another way. Sleep, vacation, and all of those things that are looked at as negative should
Mhm.
be turned around and
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of people that talk about, the work-life balance, and yet, like you said, we are penalized for taking a vacation day. It's looked down on to go to bed early. It's, if you're not working more than 40 hours, it's like, oh, you're not doing enough. And the power of sleep, again, as a as a mom of kids, little kids, I know I'm a better mom, I'm a better person if I'm rested physically and my mind is rested. So there's such power in that. And I really hope there is a shift
But as
because
a therapist, don't you see that? I imagine you see a very clear, definitive line between people's mental health and how their rest.
oh yes, yep, for sure. Especially not just the new moms, but shift workers, people that work multiple jobs, high stress jobs. It's absolutely a link between mental health and sleep or lack of it.
And that's what, I talk to my mom about this a lot because she's a neonatal nurse practitioner. So our whole
Mhm.
life she was working 30-hour shifts.
Yep.
And that's not human. So
Mhm.
whoever set that up in the first place was asking for trouble. Not only are you that's not like if I work 30 hours, I might tell someone that it's not going to rain in the right place.
Yeah.
It's or in the worst case, a hurricane's coming at a wrong time. That would be,
Mhm.
but my mom's putting tubes into 1-pound babies,
Yep. Yep.
She's supposed to do this for 30 hours with that high stress and anxiety and
Mhm.
then come off of that and be a normal human being and a mother. Come on. We're not setting ourselves up for success here, and I think all of those things came and stemmed from proving like I look at my friend who went through med school. Why does it have to be so hard and taxing?
Mhm.
These are the people that are going to save us.
Yep.
You should encourage that they get sleep so that they can learn more so that we can be better. So I think it really does all eerily come back to that one thing of like the proving and the cultural difference. But at the same time, humans are competitive, right? And so like, I don't know that you take that away.
Mm. I
And
think it's just finding that balance. It's funny you mentioned that. My husband's actually a neurosurgeon, and people are shocked at how little sleep he gets.
yeah,
And I'm like, but again, it's again, it's that the competitive, the way our society is set up, the shift where I can't believe he's good on like 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, and I'm like, what? Like, oh, I don't know. But again, the
there's
longer lasting.
differences. There's definitely physical differences. Some people need more than others, but I would say as a
Mhm.
general rule, and it almost, and maybe you can answer this too, but as a medical professional who would see someone with an issue, that and nutrition should be at the very base of
Yeah.
what we look at first.
Yep.
Let's get the baseline right and
Hmm.
then see what else we can do. Like,
Yep.
I don't think that that was ever done for me. Not I say for me, but helped me through,
Mhm.
I found along the way and I already kind of had instilled. But
Mhm.
that's another thing I wish within these euphoric areas that I see as kind of those mental health spaces where we could go and have mental health rehabilitation time that's
Mhm.
available and acceptable for
Yeah.
all. We would also start there with the Canyon Ranch basis, where everybody gets the complete nutrition and wonderful sleep that they should. And then we'll see where we go with your mental health.
Yeah, I would love that. And I think, again, it's to make yourself a whole, well, happy, adjusted person. It's so much of the mental health, it's the eating right, it's the exercise,
Mhm,
getting enough sleep. And also, you mentioned earlier the gratitude,
mhm.
being in the moment and grateful for what we have and who we are right now, despite what's looking back at us in the mirror and all of those things. And we're all works in progress and
Yeah.
trying the best we can. And
But
one
that
day at a time.
perspective, how do you give that to someone without age and without experiences, and how lucky I've been to be in all of these disasters, because I do think that without those, I would be in a much different place. Every
Mhm.
time. This
Yep.
in the past 5 weeks, I've been in 4 different natural disasters that have wrecked large amounts of people's lives. One of Lake Charles, Louisiana, has been hit twice in 6 weeks with strong hurricanes. With whatever they had left was wrecked by the second one. And like when you come away from that, it's very hard to not compare. You're like, oh, but my guilt is always super fresh. It's like, okay, that hits me over the head first.
Mhm.
And it's about channeling that again. It's like, okay,
Yep,
where are you
yep,
gonna put this guilt that you have a house that isn't blown over? How are you going to make this beyond what you do for a living gonna be better for people that are there? You can donate money. You can do
yep.
this. And as soon as I start doing those things and taking action, that's where the power comes in. And
Mhm.
another thing that, I've had the luck of being in that weird situation where I get to experience it
Mhm.
and see all of the psychology that comes post disaster. And that's
Mhm.
really all most of our traumas in our life are big
Yep.
natural disasters.
Yes.
A lot of them are natural.
Mhm.
Whether they're good nature or bad nature, they're part of life and
Yep.
happen, and there are little moments of learning,
Mhm.
survival, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Never stop learning. I know I did an interview with John Sally, the NBA player, and he said his best life advice was never stop learning. And I
Mhm.
think that's just such a great. And then that will be my final question for you. What is the best life advice or quote or mantra that you've ever been given or read? What do you live by?
Yeah, I like the never stop learning, because I often now will say, just be okay with not knowing, because in my job specifically, I was always so afraid of looking like I didn't know what was happening. I think I
Mhm.
made many more mistakes by doing that than
Mhm.
if I had just been open. People love to tell you and give you advice. They're never going to judge you for not knowing. You shouldn't know. You just got there. How are you supposed to know? So that's just career. But you know, the one that I go by, and what really ends my book and everything I always say,
Mhm.
is, as a scientist, I learned very early that our planet is a big ball of energy, and it's just energy trying to go from the poles that are cold, from the equator that's hot, and it's trying to transfer that and even itself out. It's never going to even itself out, but it will constantly try. And in that effort, it makes clouds and storms.
Mhm.
What I know is that clouds don't last forever. They can't, they won't. It's not
Mhm.
how the atmosphere works, and it's not how life works. And if you can think about it that way, it really does go back to that checklist that I probably live by and say to myself a dozen times a day. Is this going to matter tomorrow? Am I going to even remember this a week from now? If I will remember it and it will have gravity in my life a year from now, I am allowed to put energy and feelings toward it, and I'm allowed to let it wash over me. The other stuff, you can feel it, but let it pass. And
Mhm.
that's what meditation has taught me and allowed me to do, is just kind of flow through, feel and flow through. And I think that would be one other big one that I would say, is just do that checklist for yourself, because it answers pretty much everything.
Yes. Yeah. I use that a lot with clients too. So I love that you're doing that and the tools and thank you so much for your time today and being so open with me. If people want to purchase your book or find you on social media, where can they find you at?
Yeah, I'm Ginger_Z on Instagram and Twitter, and that's a great way to find my website. Has all my book stuff, but Natural Disaster, it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and bookshop.org if you want to do local bookshops, which I always think is really nice.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and chatting with me.
Thank you, Callie. Take care.